Talia's antennae quivered with anxiety as she stood before the Council of Elders. The grand chamber's bioluminescent walls pulsed in rhythm with her quickening heartbeats, three distinct organs that now seemed to be racing against each other. "You understand the gravity of your duty?" asked Elder Vexia, her voice resonating with the ceremonial tone reserved for historical moments. "I do, honored Elder," Talia replied, her lavender skin darkening slightly around her cheeks, the Crucidian equivalent of a blush. "I will represent our people with dignity." The truth was more complicated. Talia understood her duty but was terrified of what awaited her. As the daughter of a prominent diplomat, she had been chosen for something unprecedented, an arranged marriage with a human male to seal the newly formed alliance between Earth and Crucidia. Elder Vexia nodded approvingly. "The human's name is Ethan Parker. Ambassador Jalner has assured us he comes from a respectable bloodline." After the ceremony, Talia retreated to her living quarters for the last time. Her childhood friend Mila was waiting, eyes wide with concern. "You can't go through with this," Mila whispered urgently. "You know what they say about humans." Talia's third heart fluttered uncomfortably. "They're just stories." "My cousin's friend works in xenobiology," Mila insisted. "She says humans have these rituals. They isolate their mates in private dwellings. They prepare elaborate food and insist their mates consume it until they gain mass." Mila's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "And then, when the time is right, they consume them." "That's ridiculous," Talia said, though uncertainty colored her voice. She had heard these rumors since childhood, whispered tales of human predatory nature, their strange obsession with feeding their partners before some grisly feast. Why else would they insist on private living arrangements instead of communal homes like civilized species? Mila demanded. That night, Talia couldn't sleep. Her multifaceted eyes remained fixed on the ceiling as she ran through the information she had about humans. They were omnivores, that much was documented. They did have an unusual focus on food in their courtship rituals. Offering sustenance, sharing meals, and something called cooking for someone seemed to be significant displays of affection. What if there was truth to the rumors? What if this marriage was not for diplomacy, but was a clever trap to study Crucidian physiology from the inside? Her communication device chimed, displaying a message from her future husband. Talia hesitated before opening it. "Looking forward to welcoming you to Earth. I've been preparing the house and stocking the kitchen with ingredients that should be compatible with your physiology. Can't wait to cook for you." Her antennae went rigid with fear. The next morning, as she boarded the diplomatic vessel that would take her to Earth, her father embraced her. "I'm proud of you, Talia. This alliance will ensure peace between our worlds for generations." "What if the stories are true?" she finally whispered. "About humans and their eating habits." Her father laughed. "Diplomatic relations has thoroughly investigated their customs. Humans are strange, but not dangerous. Their mating rituals are complex, but not predatory." He patted her shoulder. "Besides, you've been trained in 3 forms of defensive arts. You could incapacitate this Ethan if necessary." This provided little comfort as she watched her homeworld shrink through the view screen. During the journey, Talia studied human customs obsessively. Their marriage traditions were indeed bizarre, exchanging rings made of metal, sharing domiciles, something called a honeymoon, which involved isolating the new couple completely. When the ship docked at the Earth diplomatic station, Talia stepped out wearing her ceremonial attire, flowing silver fabric that complemented her purple skin and highlighted the delicate patterns on her forearms. And there he was, Ethan Parker. Taller than she had expected, with dark hair and a strange feature called a beard partially covering his face. When he smiled, showing his teeth, omnivore teeth, Talia's middle heart nearly stopped. "Welcome to Earth," he said warmly, offering a small bow instead of the traditional human handshake. Someone had briefed him on Crucidian contact protocols. "I hope we can make this work for both our worlds." Talia forced herself to return the smile, ignoring the voice in her head that screamed, "Don't let him take you home. Don't let him feed you. Don't let him eat you." "I am honored to meet you, Ethan Parker," she replied formally. "I look forward to our partnership." As he led her toward the transport vehicle, Talia reminded herself that she was a diplomat's daughter. She would observe, adapt, and survive, even if her new husband had plans that went beyond diplomatic relations. She just hoped the stories weren't true. The hovercar ride to Ethan's dwelling was filled with what humans called small talk. Talia found it neither small nor particularly constructive as conversation, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. I hope the living arrangements will be satisfactory, Ethan said, navigating through the aerial lanes of New Washington. I have a house outside the city, more space, garden access, better for privacy. Talia's antennae twitched involuntarily at the word privacy. On Cressidia, privacy was a luxury afforded only during personal meditation. Living arrangements were communal, transparent, and safe. How isolated is this dwelling? She asked, trying to keep her third heart from racing. Ethan smiled, misinterpreting her concern. Don't worry, it's not too far from civilization. But there's enough distance that you won't be bothered by curious neighbors or press drones. The diplomatic corps thought you might appreciate some space to adjust. Space to scream without being heard, more likely, Talia thought darkly. When they arrived, Talia was surprised by the aesthetics of the human home. It was built primarily of materials called wood and stone, primitive but oddly appealing. Large transparent panels allowed natural light to enter, illuminating a spacious interior. Let me show you around, Ethan said, carrying her luggage inside. Your quarters are this way. Separate quarters. That was unexpected and slightly reassuring. Perhaps there would be time to assess the situation before any consumption occurred. The tour ended in a room Ethan called the kitchen. It contained numerous devices Talia didn't recognize and surfaces for food preparation. A large cold storage unit hummed quietly in the corner. I've been researching Cressidian cuisine, Ethan said, opening the cold unit to reveal shelves of colorful items. Ambassador Johnner provided some guidelines on what your species enjoys. I thought I'd prepare dinner tonight. Talia's mouth went dry. You want to feed me already? Well, yes, Ethan replied, looking puzzled by her reaction. You must be hungry after the journey. I was thinking of starting with something simple. He pulled out various ingredients and began manipulating them with alarming efficiency, using sharp metal implements to divide them into smaller pieces. Talia watched in horrified fascination as he heated a circular metal container and added something called oil. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to a chair at a nearby table. This won't take long. Talia sat rigidly, watching his every move. Was this how it began? Feeding her immediately upon arrival? 20 minutes later, Ethan placed a plate before her containing an arrangement of colorful items. It's a simple stir-fry with some Cressidian vegetables and earth spices that should be compatible with your physiology. The xenobiology department assured me these combinations are safe. Talia stared at the food, then at Ethan, who had served himself a similar portion and taken a seat across from her. You're eating the same food? She asked cautiously. Of course, he said, picking up a utensil. Though I can't promise I'll enjoy the flavin nectar as much as you might. It's a bit tart for human tastes. This was not what she had expected. If he intended to fatten her up, why share the same meal? Over the next week, Ethan continued to prepare meals, always sharing them with her. He was unfailingly polite, respecting her personal space and never attempting to touch her without permission, which Talia never granted. Each evening, she retreated to her quarters, securing the door with a chair as a precaution. On the 8th day, Talia overheard Ethan speaking on his communication device in the garden. Yeah, she's settling in, but still seems pretty nervous, he was saying to someone. I'm thinking of making a special dinner tomorrow night, something that might break the ice. A pause. I know. The marriage was arranged, but I'd like us to at least be comfortable with each other. Maybe even friends eventually. Another pause. I've got that bottle of wine we talked about. And I'm planning to ask her about moving forward with the relationship, see if she's ready for the next step. Talia backed away from the window, her 3 hearts pounding in synchronized terror. The next step. Tomorrow night, he planned to finally reveal his true intentions. That evening, she noticed Ethan checking the cold storage unit, making notes. Need to get more groceries, he muttered. Want to make sure everything's perfect for tomorrow. Later, she caught him studying what appeared to be a culinary instruction document labeled Perfect Romantic Dinner. The image on the screen showed an elaborate table setting with something called candles, primitive fire sources used in human rituals. After Ethan retired to his room, Talia crept into the kitchen. The cold storage unit contained new items, exotic vegetables, something labeled prime rib, and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon 2073, which, according to her cultural briefing, was an intoxicating substance humans consume to lower inhibitions. It all suddenly made terrible sense. The separate quarters to make her feel safe. The shared meals to gain her trust. And now, this special night, where he would finally make his move. As she returned to her room, Talia saw something that confirmed her worst fears, a large, sharp implement lying on the countertop. The handle was engraved with the words carving knife. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she researched human predatory behaviors on her datapad and prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most dangerous dinner of her life. The next day passed in a haze of mounting anxiety. Ethan seemed unusually attentive, asking about her preferences, whether she enjoyed certain flavors, if she had any dietary restrictions he should know about. Each question felt like a chef inquiring about seasoning preferences. "I was thinking we could eat in the dining room tonight," Ethan said casually as afternoon faded into evening. "It's a bit more formal than the kitchen." "Formal," Talia repeated, her voice higher than usual. "Just thought it might be nice for a change." He smiled, and Talia noticed how his eyes crinkled at the corners. If you weren't potentially planning to devour her, she might have found it charming. "I'll prepare myself," she said, retreating to her quarters. Once inside, Talia paced frantically. She had three options: flee the house entirely, confront Ethan directly, or fortify her position. Fleeing seemed cowardly and might jeopardize the alliance. Confrontation was too dangerous if her suspicions proved correct. Fortification it was. Talia sent a quick message to the Cressidian embassy. Situation potentially unstable. Will update within 24 hours. If no contact, investigate. Then she began moving furniture. The heavy dresser went against the door first, followed by the desk chair wedged under the handle. She piled decorative cushions against the lower gap and used her ceremonial sash to bind the internal lock mechanism for extra security. From outside, she heard kitchen sounds, the clash of metal implements, the sizzle of heat on organic matter, the occasional soft human vocalization Ethan made when concentrating, a sound like hum. Her datapad chimed with a notification. The Earth News Network was broadcasting a documentary about traditional human courtship rituals. She played it at low volume, seeking any information that might help. "The practice of cooking for one's potential mate dates back millennia," the narrator explained. "The offering of food demonstrates providing capacity and nurturing tendencies. In modern times, the romantic dinner remains a cornerstone of human courtship." Talia froze as the documentary showed humans consuming something with red liquid oozing from it. The caption read, "Rare steak, a luxury dinner item." A knock at her door made her jump. "Talia?" Ethan's voice came through the barrier. "Dinner's ready whenever you are." She didn't respond. "Talia? Are you all right?" The handle jiggled. Then pressure applied to the door met the resistance of her barricade. "Talia?" Now concern colored his voice. "Why is the door blocked? Is something wrong?" Her 3 hearts pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear them. Still, she remained silent. "Look, if you're not feeling well, or if you need more time, that's completely fine. I want to make sure you're okay." Silence stretched between them. "Talia, I'm getting worried. Can you at least let me know you're alive in there?" Finally, she found her voice. "I am. Functional," she managed. "That's good." Relief was evident in his tone. "Can I ask why you've barricaded the door?" Talia swallowed hard. "I know what tonight is," she said. "You do?" He sounded surprised, then pleased. "Well, I was hoping it could be special. A chance for us to talk more personally, maybe start building something real beyond the diplomatic arrangement." "Building something real?" she repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call it?" Confusion entered his voice. Yes. What would you call it?" Talia's antennae quivered with indignation. "I would call it murder." A long pause followed. "I'm sorry," Ethan said slowly. "Did you just say murder?" "Do not pretend ignorance." Talia's voice rose. "I have observed your preparations. The special meal, the sharp implements, the red wine to dull my senses. Talia, I'm completely lost here. What do you think is happening? I know about human customs. How you isolate your mates, feed them elaborate meals, and then when the time is right." She couldn't finish the sentence. "When the time is right, what?" Ethan prompted, sounding genuinely bewildered. "You consume them," Talia cried out. This time the silence lasted so long Talia wondered if Ethan had left. Then she heard a sound, strange, rhythmic, almost like coughing but lighter. He was laughing. "Talia," he finally said, voice still shaking with suppressed mirth, "humans don't eat their mates. That's not a thing. At all. Ever." The documentary showed humans consuming meat with red fluid, she insisted. Just like what you prepared tonight. That's animal protein, not people. Certainly not spouses. Another burst of laughter. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but where did you get this idea? Everyone on Chrysidia knows about human mating habits, she said, slightly less certain now. How you provide dwelling, offer food, increase your mate's body mass. Increase body mass. You think I've been trying to fatten you up? For consumption? Put that way, it did sound far-fetched. But still, why else would you prepare all these elaborate meals? She demanded. Because sharing food is how humans bond. It's hospitable. It's kindness, not preparation for cannibalism. Talia moved closer to the door, though she didn't unbarricade it. Then explained the carving knife. It's for the roast. The beef. Not for you. Ethan sounded exasperated now. Talia, I promise on my life and the Earth-Chrysidian alliance that I have absolutely zero intention of eating you. Now or ever. That's not what marriage means to humans. Then what does it mean? She asked quietly. Ethan sighed, and she heard him slide down to sit against the other side of the door. Partnership, he said simply. Companionship. Sharing life's journey with someone you grow to care about. Sometimes love comes first, sometimes it grows over time. Ours was arranged, but I had hoped. His voice trailed off, and Talia felt an unfamiliar sensation, something like regret mixed with hope. You had hoped what? She prompted. That we might become friends, at least. Maybe more, eventually. But definitely not dinner. Despite herself, Talia felt her mouth curve into what humans would recognize as a smile. Friends, she repeated, testing the concept. Not food. Absolutely not food, he confirmed. I can send you links to actual human cultural databases if that would help. Or call Ambassador Jalner to verify. But I promise, humans don't eat their spouses. That's just not a thing. Talia looked at her barricade, feeling simultaneously foolish and relieved. I may have misinterpreted some signals. You think? Ethan replied, but his tone was gentle, almost teasing. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, Talia laughed, a melodic, trilling sound that seemed to brighten the room. The dinner is probably cold by now, she said apologetically. It can be reheated, Ethan replied. When you're ready. No pressure. Talia looked at her fortifications. Perhaps it was time to tear down some walls. It took Talia 15 minutes to dismantle her barricade. When she finally opened the door, she found Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through his datapad. I've pulled up some educational materials on human relationships, he said, looking up at her with a gentle smile. And I've messaged Ambassador Jalner. She's quite amused and says there's been a cultural misunderstanding of considerable proportion. Talia's skin darkened with embarrassment. I feel rather foolish. Don't, Ethan said, standing. Cross-species communication is bound to have hiccups. Though I admit, my spouse thinks I'm going to eat her is a pretty significant hiccup. He offered to show her the educational materials, and they moved to the living area, a neutral space that felt safer than either the dining room with its abandoned romantic dinner or her recently fortified bedroom. So, humans form pair bonds for companionship, resource sharing, emotional support, and reproduction, Talia summarized after reviewing the information. Not for nutritional purposes. Exactly, Ethan confirmed. Though I should clarify that our arrangement doesn't obligate you to any reproductive aspects. His skin took on a pinkish hue that Talia recognized as the human equivalent of her own violet blush. What are your expectations of this arrangement? She asked directly. Ethan considered this. Honestly, I volunteered because I believe in the alliance. I work in xenoanthropology, human alien cultural studies, and thought I could contribute meaningfully. I hoped we might develop a friendship that could serve as a model for future human-Chrysidian relations. You weren't assigned? This surprised her. No. The diplomatic corps asked for volunteers with compatible backgrounds. I applied. This revelation shifted something in Talia's perception. Why? Ethan shrugged, a human gesture she was beginning to recognize as indicating casual uncertainty. Curiosity. Idealism. The chance to be part of something historic. He paused. And I've always found Chrysidian culture fascinating. Even before meeting actual Chrysidians? I've worked with your ambassador for 2 years, he explained. Jalner has been very patient with my questions. Talia relaxed slightly. So, what happens now? Well, the food really is cold, Ethan said with a smile. But I could reheat it. Or we could start over with something simpler. Simpler sounds appealing. They moved to the kitchen, where Ethan prepared a light meal of what he called sandwiches, a surprisingly efficient food delivery system consisting of edible materials layered between carbohydrate platforms. As they ate, Talia observed him more objectively than before. Without the lens of terror, she noticed details she'd missed. How his movements were deliberately slow and telegraphed when he handled kitchen implements around her. How he maintained a respectful distance. How his eyes, a striking shade that humans called hazel, actually seemed kind. "May I ask what led to your specific concern?" Ethan inquired as they finished eating. "About humans consuming their mates?" Talia hesitated, then explained the rumors that had circulated on Chrysidia for decades, how humans were seen as mysterious predators who isolated their mates in private dwellings, repeatedly offered food, and eventually. "Well, that's distressing," Ethan said, looking genuinely troubled. "No wonder you were terrified. But I'm curious where that idea originated. Cultural misinterpretation, perhaps?" Talia suggested. "Humans do have many rituals involving food and partnership." "True, but there's a significant gap between, 'I want to cook dinner for you,' and 'I want to cook you for dinner.'" The phrasing was so absurd that Talia found herself laughing again, that melodic trilling that seemed to brighten Ethan's expression whenever he heard it. They spent the evening reviewing more cultural materials, correcting misunderstandings on both sides. Talia learned that the honeymoon was not an isolation period for prey preparation but a tradition of bonding time. Ethan discovered that Chrysidian antennae movements were not merely decorative but conveyed emotional states, which explained why Talia had seemed to be twitching in fear whenever he approached with food. "I have a proposal," Ethan said as the night grew late. "Let's start over. Not as diplomatic arrangements or interspecies specimens, but as two people trying to build something worthwhile." "I would like that," Talia admitted, "though I may need time to fully decompress from my previous concerns." "Understandable," Ethan nodded. "I promise never to pressure you or eat you." The joke hung between them for a moment before they both burst into laughter. The next morning, Talia emerged from her room to find Ethan had prepared a small but varied breakfast featuring both Earth and Chrysidian options. "I wasn't sure what you'd prefer," he explained. "So I made options." "Thank you," she said, selecting a Chrysidian fruit along with something Ethan called toast. As they ate, she gathered her courage. "Would you teach me to cook? Human style?" Ethan's expression brightened. "I'd love to." That afternoon became their first cooking lesson. Ethan taught her how to safely handle kitchen implements, explaining their purposes in ways that made her previous fears seem almost comical. The carving knife that had terrified her was demonstrated on vegetables, not sentient beings. As days passed, their relationship evolved. Talia shared Chrysidian cultural practices, teaching Ethan the intricate antenna signals that conveyed emotions too subtle for words. He showed her Earth entertainment streams, explaining human humor and art forms. 3 weeks after the Barricade incident, they hosted Ambassador Jalner for dinner, a meal they had prepared together. The ambassador observed their easy interaction with approval. "The council will be pleased," she said as the evening concluded. "This partnership appears to be functioning well beyond diplomatic expectations." After she departed, Ethan found Talia on the garden terrace, gazing at Earth's single moon. "Functioning well beyond diplomatic expectations," he quoted, joining her. High praise from Jalner. "Is that all this is?" Talia asked softly. "Diplomatic functioning?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I don't think so. Not anymore." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Talia reached out, her slender fingers brushing against his. "We have a saying on Chrysidia," she murmured. "Understanding grows like crystal formations, one facet at a time." Ethan smiled. "I think I'm beginning to understand quite a lot." That night, Talia didn't close her bedroom door. Not fully. She left it slightly ajar, not an invitation, but an opening, a possibility, a beginning. 6 months had passed since Talia had barricaded herself in the guest room, convinced her human husband intended to devour her. Now, as she stood before the full-length mirror adjusting her formal attire, the memory brought a trilling laugh to her lips. "What's so amusing?" Ethan asked, entering their now shared bedroom. He was dressed in diplomatic formal wear, a sleek suit accented with Chrysidian geometric patterns. "I was remembering my first week here," she admitted. "How I once thought this was a trap." She gestured to their home, which had transformed over time. Chrysidian bioluminescent art now adorned walls alongside Earth photographs. Their dwelling had become truly interspecies, like their relationship. Ethan's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. From "he's going to eat me" to "we're hosting the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Dinner in 6 months. We've come a long way." He approached her, and Talia's antennae moved in a pattern that conveyed affection, a signal Ethan had learned to recognize and cherish. When he reached for her hand, she gave it willingly, their fingers intertwining despite the anatomical differences. "Are you nervous about tonight?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "This dinner represents more than diplomatic formalities. It's the first time a mixed human Cressidian couple has hosted such an event." "We'll change perceptions," Ethan said confidently. "One misunderstanding at a time." The evening's guest list included high-ranking diplomats from both worlds, along with representatives from 3 other allied species. Their home had been chosen as the venue specifically to showcase successful interspecies cohabitation. As the first guests arrived, Talia welcomed them with perfect diplomatic poise. Yet beneath the formality was genuine warmth, something she had learned from Ethan. Ambassador Jollner arrived with her human counterpart, Ambassador Washington. "The kitchen smells magnificent," Jollner commented, her antennae quivering with anticipation. "I detect both Cressidian spice harmony and earth herbs. We've been experimenting with fusion cuisine," Ethan explained. "Tonight's menu represents a true blending of our culinary traditions." As more guests arrived, the home filled with the melodic hum of multiple species engaged in diplomatic conversation. Talia moved through the gathering with practiced ease, no longer the terrified bride who had arrived 6 months earlier. During dinner, Ambassador Washington raised his glass. "To our hosts, who embody the promise of true interspecies harmony. And to misunderstandings overcome," Ambassador Jollner added with a knowing glance at Talia. Later, as dessert was being served, a remarkable creation that combined earth chocolate with Cressidian crystalline nectar, a junior Cressidian diplomat approached Talia in a quiet moment. "Is it true," she whispered, her antennae twitching nervously, "that you once believed humans consumed their mates? My grandmother told me such stories as a hatchling." Talia smiled kindly. "Cultural misunderstandings can persist for generations. But I can assure you, my husband has only metaphorical appetite for my company." From across the room, she caught Ethan's eye. He was deep in conversation with an Arcturian delegate, but still aware of her, still connected. He winked, a human gesture she now understood conveyed shared secrets and affection. After the guests departed, Talia and Ethan stood in their garden under Earth's moon and Cressidia's distant sun, both visible as pinpoints of light in the night sky. "I've been invited to lecture at the Cressidian Academy of Interspecies Relations," Ethan said, arm around her waist. "They want me to speak about human relationship customs. Apparently, there are still some misconceptions to address." Talia laughed. "Will you tell them about our beginning?" "It makes for a compelling narrative," he admitted. "The terrified bride, the baffled groom, the barricaded door. And the happy ending," she added softly. Ethan turned to face her directly. "Is that what this is? An ending?" "No," Talia said, her antennae curving forward in the gesture that humans might interpret as a tender caress. "It's still very much a beginning." 3 weeks later, they stood before the Cressidian Academy's Grand Assembly. Thousands of young Cressidians filled the bioluminescent auditorium, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the unusual couple at the podium. "Cultural understanding requires vulnerability," Talia began. "The willingness to admit ignorance and the courage to learn. And sometimes," Ethan continued, "it requires dismantling a barricade, both literal and metaphorical." The assembled students laughed at the now famous story of their beginning. In the 6 months since the barricade incident, as it had come to be known, Talia and Ethan had become unlikely celebrities in diplomatic circles, their misunderstandings serving as both cautionary tale and inspiration. "Today, we're announcing the establishment of the Parker-Talia Cultural Exchange Program," Ethan declared. "A formal pathway for young Cressidians and humans to experience each other's worlds firsthand, without the pressure of arranged marriages." The applause was thunderous. That evening, in their guest quarters at the Cressidian Diplomatic Complex, Talia found Ethan studying a document on his datapad. "What's captured your attention so completely?" she asked, settling beside him. "Reports of similar misunderstandings between humans and other species," he explained. "Apparently, we've been misinterpreted more than once. The Arcturians believed humans collected their mate-shed exoskeletons as trophies." Talia laughed. "And do you collect trophies?" "Well," Ethan said, Setting aside the date I've had to pull her close, I do consider myself tremendously fortunate to have won you. Won me? Talia's antennae quivered with amusement. I was assigned to you. And yet, he murmured, brushing his lips against her forehead in the human affection gesture she had come to treasure, I feel like I've won something precious beyond diplomatic calculation. Later, as they prepared for sleep, now sharing quarters without fear or hesitation, Talia reflected on their journey. From terror to tolerance, from tolerance to friendship, from friendship to something deeper that transcended both their species' vocabulary for affection. Ethan, she whispered in the darkness, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't barricaded that door? If I had simply accepted what I believed was my fate? His arm tightened around her. I prefer not to imagine a universe where you believed, even for a moment, that I would harm you. It wasn't entirely irrational, she pointed out. Your species does consume other species. For nutrition, not romance, he clarified with a chuckle. And speaking of consumption, I've been thinking about that fusion restaurant we passed in the Central District. Dinner tomorrow. Talia's antennae performed the gesture that had become Ethan's favorite, a graceful curve that conveyed not just agreement but joyful anticipation. I would be delighted, she said. As long as I'm your dinner companion and not your dinner. Ethan laughed, the sound warming her 3 hearts. Always the former, never the latter. I promise. Their journey was far from over. There would be more misunderstandings, more barriers to overcome, more bridges to build. But as ambassadors of possibility, they had already accomplished something revolutionary, proving that even the most profound cultural misunderstandings could be overcome with patience, humor, and the universal language of care. And as for those old Cressidian stories about humans eating their mates, they were being rewritten, one interstellar love story at a time.